Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Hestia, Hecate Melinoe and Thalia? Part 1. Huge shout out to Scheffinator for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. In a void, sits a handsome 26-year-old man with a beard-mustache combo connected to his hair by sideburns. Welp, it's time to bring in the gang. The man says with a smile before snapping his fingers. The snap causes 21 flashes of light to appear. From these flashes of light appear the forms of the 12 members of the Olympian Council: Hades, Hestia, Persephone, Hecate, Melinoe, Thalia Grace the lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis, Percy Jackson the hero of Olympus, Sally Jackson, and Annabeth Chase the architect of Olympus. Welcome everyone. Our handsome host says. Who are you mortal? Zeus thunders, pun intended. My name is Scheffinator, but you can call me Chef. As I'm sure that some of you are wondering where you are and why I brought you here. To answer those questions, I was hired by Chaos to show all of you a version of your world where the Earth Mother decided to make a mortal from the age of the Titans into an immortal. Chef says with a charming smile. Why am I here then? Thalia asks with an annoyed look. That will be explained in the book. Also, there will be no violence while you're here. Any who try will be bound and gagged with specially made bindings and their own underwear as the gag. Chef has a wicked grin at the punishment should anyone try to defy him. Everyone shudders, some in disgust and some, Melinoe, in arousal. In any case, let's start the show. Chef says with another snap of his fingers. I'm glad we did this. It's been so long since it was just the two of us. Athena said, a content smile on her face as she walked the streets of Manhattan. Being one of the busiest out of her family, she took the time to enjoy the rare days she had off, where she could decompress and let the responsibilities of godhood slip away from her shoulders. Dressed in regular clothes like the mortals her family ruled over, she tried not to stand out as she walked the stone streets of New York. Okay, who are you with Athena? Zeus asked with a frown, hoping that Athena wasn't on a date. He really didn't want to hear about his little war princess's love life. I call BS on you being busy. Hermes says with a frown. To her right, her sister Artemis walked beside her. The daughters of Zeus took solace in each other's company, the similarities between them helping to form the bridge between their close sisterly relationship in their early days of existence. Out of all the gods and goddesses on Olympus, Athena felt her most comfortable when she was with her younger sister. There was no game with Artemis and no need to keep one eye over her shoulder. The bonds of sisterhood were strong between them, and Athena knew she could rely on Artemis to have her back. Good. Zeus says with a small smile and a nod, relieved that his precious little girls were just bonding with each other, causing both Athena and Artemis to flush in embarrassment, while the less mature gods are laughing at the two. I agree. Though I'm not usually one for the concrete jungle of New York, I'm enjoying our quality time together. It's been months since it was only us. Artemis replied. Like her sister, she was dressed in casual mortal clothes, giving up her usual silver parka and camouflage pants. Her lieutenant, Zoe, could handle looking after the hunt for an afternoon and had her utmost trust to keep the girls in line. I would give anything to stay away from Olympus right now. Trouble at home? Sally asks with a kind smile. You could say that. Most of the gods of Olympus say with nods. Agreed. Hera is on the warpath again and I have no desire to be in her way. Athena replied. Her last memory of the queen was watching the beautiful woman storming towards Zeus's temple, the earth cracking beneath her sandals and her eyes radiating godly power. She didn't need to be the goddess of wisdom to understand what was happening. Whenever Hera found out Zeus had cheated on her again, all of Olympus fled from the incoming warzone. Nothing good came from an argument between the king and queen, and no god or goddess had any desire to get wrapped up in the quarrel. Even Hestia would slip away and make herself scarce. Despite their feelings on the matter, the Olympian daughters of Zeus couldn't fault Hera for her outbursts and shouting matches with her husband. Hera's temper was legendary. People wonder why we remain virgins and refuse to take husbands. Case in point. Artemis joked, pointing up to the sky and making her sister laugh. Seeing Zeus's volatile marriage to Hera would turn most people off of the concept of marriage. When one half of the married couple was not as committed as the other, then it made said marriage redundant in their eyes. Okay, what is you so angered this time, sister? Demeter asked of her sister and queen. Getting a shrug in return. From what they could gather by the volatile argument Zeus and Hera got into on the winter solstice, Zeus had fathered a little girl somewhere in California 3 years ago, and the mother had brought her to Manhattan. Her name was Thalia, named after one of the muses, and was the first child born to their father since before World War II. Their father and their uncles had vowed to never sire another demigod. It was their effort to avoid the next great prophecy from coming to fruition. No one expected the vow to last, and unsurprising, Zeus was the first one to give in to his lust. The king of the gods had no luck when it came to keeping it in his pants, and his willpower towards beautiful women was weak. It seemed to be a trait that ran in their immortal family. They weren't sure what happened to the pair, but they were turned away at the door of the Empire State Building by the guard. "Ah. That's what has me so mad," Hera says with a frown. The almighty libido strikes," Chef says with a chuckle. "Almighty libido?" Athena asks. "It's something I picked up from one of my fellow watchers of the various worlds you all are involved in that translates into Zeus's lust that all of his children have inherited. My fellow watcher used it in a series of one-shot stories where the main male character is the adopted son of the huntress, and no, he isn't a demigod, but a clear-sighted mortal in the one-shots that led to a whole new world," Chef explains. "Will we see this world at some point?" Artemis asks. Chef just shrugs as even he doesn't know if they will or not. The chill of the December month nipped at their skin, though the feeling didn't bother the pair of goddesses as it did to mortals. They'd walk the streets for a couple of hours, conversing like they would with complete comfortability with each other. It was a couple of days after the winter solstice, and the mortal holiday Christmas had been days earlier. The streets were bustling with people, filled with mortals taking advantage of the post-Christmas deals. Mortals were very focused on having the latest product of just about anything and everything in today's era. They wondered if Aphrodite had something to do with that. They wouldn't put it past the goddess of love. "Why I never. HMPH. Said goddess of love just pouts cutely at the accusation. "I don't know Dite, it certainly sounds like something you would do. Especially around Valentine's Day," Apollo says with a knowing smile on his face. Speaking of the goddess of love, the daughters of Zeus ensured they weren't followed by the daughter of Uranos, spreading their essence throughout the world, making it harder for anyone to locate them. Aphrodite had a habit of showing up in the middle of their sisterly days out, taking over completely, and forcing them to go to the places she wanted to go and do the things she wanted to do. While Athena could tolerate being around Aphrodite, the day would usually end up with Artemis and Aphrodite getting in an argument. It would always start with Aphrodite throwing an offhanded comment her way and Artemis taking it as an insult. On more than one occasion, Athena had to physically restrain the goddess of the moon and call upon Hestia to take Aphrodite back to Olympus before the two goddesses went at it. "You both do act that way at times," Athena says with a groan while massaging her head to fight off phantom pains from migraines. Artemis and Aphrodite just look in opposite directions. In terms of fighting capabilities, Artemis was the superior fighter in every way and was one of Olympus's best fighters. However, Aphrodite could be deceptively cunning, and being the youngest daughter of Uranos, she boasted greater raw power than both of them. A battle between love and the moon could only result in utter chaos on a global scale. Which is true. That's why the two of you are forbidden from fighting. Zeus thunders, again pun intended, getting nods from the other gods and goddesses in attendance. The two goddesses of the moon and love just look away from each other with pouts on their faces. "I'm feeling hungry. We could see if it's safe to return to Olympus. I bet we could convince Aunt Hestia to whip us up something," Artemis asked, a gleam in her eye. No one loved their aunts cooking more than Artemis. Athena thought about it. "I could go for something, but let's stay in the city for now. I have no desire to run into Hera or father. We'll be there for hours if they try to talk about their problems with us." "Agreed. Do you have anywhere in mind?" "Not particularly. Perhaps we could." Athena started, but stopped when something caught her eye. "What's that?" Artemis hummed, turning in the direction Athena was looking in. They were somewhere in the West Village, and her sister's attention was solely on the small building that stood on the corner of Nineteenth Bedford Street. It looked like any other building in the West Village, but the front of the restaurant on the ground floor stood out next to the gray-colored stone. In particular, the front of the building was made mostly out of glass, but was met by a bright orange frame and door that stood in the center of the building. An open sign hung behind the glass door, and across the frame sat the name of the establishment, the Fox's Den. Who would willingly paint something so hideously? Aphrodite was the one to voice what was on everyone's minds. Chef bursts out into laughter. That shade of orange is what the protagonist enjoys. The Fox's Den? I've never heard of such a place. Neither have I, and I know every building and store in New York like the back of my hand. It must be new. Athena said back, her curiosity piquing. "Shall we?" Artemis made a motion with her hand. "Led the way, sister." Lead she did, with the two goddesses making their way towards the Fox's Den, interest piquing their thoughts. Well, for Athena at least. Artemis, on the other hand, was just hungry. She felt like she could eat course after course right now. The bell went off when they walked through the door, a shroud of warmth blanketing over them and making the sisters hum in content. It was well lit and open and appeared bigger than either anticipated. Along the wall on the right were a couple of booths, well more than a dozen round tables with comfy-looking chairs scattered across the room and next to the windows. The counter stood at the side with a swinging door leading into another room behind it, with a glass cabinet sat next to it. Inside, Artemis spied cakes and other delicacies of all shapes lined up neatly in multiple rows. And most women believe that men think with their stomachs. Hecate says with a snort. Persephone and Melinoe follow her example. This causes Artemis to flush while sending a scathing look to her twin and her other brothers, minus Hephaestus who could care less. The smell of rich and freshly made pastries wafted through the room, accompanied by a mix of coffee and chocolate. The delightful aroma made both women shiver in delight, reminding them of Aunt Hestia's treats back on Olympus. They quickly realized it was more of a cafe diner than a restaurant, but neither looked like they minded. Will this do? Athena asked and tried not to laugh when she found her sister staring into the glass cabinet, her face pressing against the glass. Despite her reputation, Artemis was a child goddess at heart. I am not. Artemis says with a frown. Oh, you so are lil sis. Apollo says with a grin. If mother were here, she would agree with me. Artemis just looks away with a pout. Now there's an idea for later. Chef says with a grin. It all looks amazing, Artemis whispered, admiring the delicate frosting that coated the carrot cake. Athena leaned down next to her and had to admit they all look amazing. Sometimes, it amazed her at the handiwork of mortals. While she wasn't known for possessing as strong of a sweet tooth as Artemis, she liked to treat herself every now and again with something sweet. Thank you for the compliment. Athena's eyes trailed away from the sweet treats and found an amused young man looking back at her from over the counter. His chin rested in his palm and a big grin sat on his face. Most would never dare to lean so close to her, much less Artemis, but it wasn't like he knew who they were. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Artemis tense up and her facial expression turned colder than before. Her silver eyes bore into the man's blue ones with quick intensity, as if silently telling him not to come any closer. Her silver eyes gently glowed in warning, though only enough for Athena to notice. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the protagonist, Naruto Uzumaki no Mikaze the Nanade more 7th Hokage or Fire Shadow of Konohagakure, no Sato or the village hidden in the leaves. Chef says with a flourish while the screen zooms into the face of Naruto. So cute. Aphrodite squeals at the whiskers on Naruto's cheeks. So, what does his name translate to? Athena asks. Well, Naruto means either fish cake or maelstrom whirlpool of wave wind. Chef says. I like him already. Poseidon says with a grin, knowing that the translations are things that happen in his domain. To the man's credit, he didn't look affected. He looked more amused if anything by Artemis and reached behind the counter and pulled out 2 menus. Here, these are for you both. Take your pick where you would like to sit and I'll be with you shortly. He straightened up, getting rid of the grin and giving the goddesses a polite smile in return. Thank you, Athena politely replied and led Artemis away by the wrist to a nearby table by the window, whispering, stop glaring. Artemis shook her head, sorry. He surprised me, that's all. I didn't realize someone was behind the counter. Well, you were close to drooling over the carrot cake he had in there. I can't blame you, Athena teased, silently laughing as Artemis's cheeks had a tinge of gold wash over them in embarrassment. Not a word, Artemis replied, giving her sister a pointed look before both opened up their menus. The first thing that caught their attention was the variety. There was a lot to choose from, far more than other cafe diners they visited. Some of the choices were unique to witness for this type of establishment. Looking around, the room was half full and Athena gazed across the tables to see what people were eating. Most were drinking coffee, which didn't surprise her, but she spied a couple of meals. In the corner, she saw a gentleman eating eggs Benedict and by the moans coming from his mouth, he was enjoying his food a great deal. Athena. Artemis said with a betrayed look on her face at her sister silently laughing at her embarrassment. You do look quite funny Lady Artemis. Thalia says with a small grin. Not you too Thalia. Artemis says feeling even more betrayed. Looking over her menu, she failed to hide her smile when she looked at her sister. Artemis looked lost in the options, her silver eyes twinkling. If Athena was a betting person, she bet her sister was devouring the options in the dessert and cake section. When a few minutes passed, the man from the counter appeared by the table, a small notebook in his hand. No longer standing behind the counter, Athena and Artemis got a good look at him. If they had to guess, he looked the same age as Athena in her current form, somewhere in his mid-20s. He was blonde with bright azure eyes. His skin was tanned and looked like he belonged on a beach somewhere in California. He was tall, around the same height as Apollo and Hermes in their mortal forms, and was built lean. He was dressed in smart casual wear, with dark jeans and a white shirt, and around his waist was a black apron with a logo of the diner on the front in orange. If we weren't sure that he was mortal, then he could pass as one of my kids. Apollo says with a bright grin. Funny, because my fellow watcher that I borrowed the almighty libido gag from Doze have a version of your world where Naruto is not only a son of Apollo when he was married, but is also the reincarnation of Helios as well, while being in the employment of Hades. Chef says with a grin, giving acknowledgement to his good friend Bonesboy 15. Hera looked intrigued while Apollo looked horrified. At first glance, they thought he was a son of Apollo, since he had the typical traits of their brother's demigod children. However, getting a sense of the man, they couldn't sense any godly connection that a demigod typically had. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Fox's Den. My name is Naruto, it's nice to meet you both. He introduced and glanced at Artemis. I'm sorry if I startled you earlier. Artemis narrowed her eyes up at the man, but saw no ill will in his gaze. It's fine, but you didn't startle me. I was just engrossed in your selections in the cabinet, that's all. I see. Thank you for the compliment, though. I'm glad you liked what you saw. His words sounded sincere, and Artemis couldn't sense him playing any game. He didn't appear bothered by their beauty, unlike others in the room who kept glancing at them from the corners of their eyes. It wasn't every day two beautiful women of their standard walked into a place like this. Perhaps he would be tolerable. Did the owner make them all? She asked, nodding in the direction of the cabinet. Most of them, yes. Some came from the suppliers, but most of them are from my hands. He admitted. You're the owner? I am. Artemis didn't say much else. He felt her gaze linger on him before it slipped back to the menu. He took that as his cue to move on and turned to Athena. Naruto, you say? Athena asked, leaning back on her chair and appearing amused by his name. Her gray eyes sparkled with curiosity. It's rare to meet someone with a Japanese name and yet doesn't appear to hold any ties to Japan. He laughed. I guess you could say my parents had a flair for exotic names. I see that. I must say, your menu is unique. It's not like other menus you see for a cafe diner like this one. Athena mentioned. Any reason for that? She didn't know what she expected for him to say, but she didn't expect him to shrug. Not really. I'm fortunate enough that I've traveled the world and learned all types of different delicacies each country has to offer. I did think about creating a restaurant, but I've always preferred cafe diners. I find them to be more intimate and gives you more of a chance to get to know the people that visit. No need to pretend, Artie. You were startled and you know it. Apollo bragged, causing Artemis to punch him in the arm. Ow. Chef, why didn't you stop that? Apollo asked. Because you deserved it. Should someone deserve to be harmed, I will allow it. Chef replied, causing Ares to gulp in fear, not that he would ever admit it. Athena nodded. Did you ever get a chance to visit Greece? I happen to be Greek myself. Degrees plus or minus 1/2 plus or minus degrees plus or minus superscript 1 superscript 2 a acute degrees plus or minus a umlaut 1/2 c cedilla a acute I grave 1/2 1/4 a grave I'm uac cedilla a acute superscript 1 a tilde a umlaut I did, and I found my time very enjoyable. Both Athena and Artemis looked surprised at his sudden language change. It wasn't often they met someone in New York who could speak Greek. It wasn't a language most people chose to learn, unlike French or Spanish. Getting over her surprise, Athena gave him an appraising look. I'm impressed. You speak well, and fluently. Thank you. It took a long time, but I finally managed to catch on. He replied, before clicking the top of his pen. Are you both ready to order? I think so, Artemis muttered, giving her sister a pointed look before looking back at the blonde. I'll take a hot chocolate with a slice of the carrot cake. Could I also have a dash of vanilla in my drink, please? Absolutely. He replied before adding, would you like whipped cream and chocolate sprinkles on your hot chocolate? I would, yes. I'll take a latte, please. Like my sister, I'll have a dash of vanilla in my drink, and may I ask, what is your special dessert of the day? Athena asked. Her interest peaked when she saw that little nugget on the menu. Of course. The specialty today is a lemon curd Italiano semifreddo. He told her and failed to hide his smile when he saw her eyes sparkle. She liked the sound of that. That sounds wonderful. I'll have that, please. Naruto nodded and wrote down the order. Absolutely. You're in luck, we ran out an hour ago, but I've got the next batch almost ready. It will take about 10 minutes if you don't mind waiting. It's proved to be very popular today. That would be fine. Athena nodded and watched him walk away. When he walked back behind the counter, she turned to her sister and noticed her silver eyes gazing straight at her. What? I didn't say anything. No, but you look like you want to say something. It's nothing. I'm just noticing how chummy you were with the man. Athena rolled her eyes and scoffed. I was merely caught off guard by the way he spoke Greek. It's not every day someone in New York can't speak fluent Greek. If he can learn a second language and open up his own business, it means he's got one of these. Athena poked the side of her head, plus he's the only one not leering in our direction, which is nice. I swear, if that man in the corner licks his lips in my direction one more time, I will throw this knife straight into his eye. She picked up the knife and toyed with it between her fingers. You know I would. Oh, I know you would, sister. Athena laughed, plucking the knife out of her sister's hand and putting it back on the table. The last thing she wanted was her sister to make a scene. Artemis huffed and tried to look annoyed at her sister, but started to laugh along with Athena as her sister gently kicked her under the table. We should do this more often. It's nice to get away from everyone. We really should get out more, sister. Athena says to Artemis, who nods in agreement. I agree. It's not like my hunters are incapable of looking after themselves once a week. I think once a week would be lovely. It wasn't long before they were interrupted by the blonde barista, who placed their drinks on the table in front of them. Both goddesses looked impressed with their orders and recognized the signs of someone taking care and pride in their work. Artemis did her best to keep her face from drooping as the delightful smell of her hot chocolate wafted around her nose. It smelled just like the hot chocolate Hestia would prepare for her. Athena had a similar expression on her face, wrapping her hand around the warm mug. When he placed Artemis's carrot cake in front of her, the goddess licked her lips, her sweet tooth craving for the treat. You do have quite the sweet tooth, moonflower. Zeus says with a small smile towards his daughter, getting a flushed pout in return. Artemis just glares at her immature brothers and the goddess of love. While Naruto prepared Athena's order, the two quietly drank their drinks, both relaxing into their seats as the taste touched their lips. Both let out a sigh of delight, impressed by their orders. It was easy to make a bad drink, but it was difficult to make a great one. So far, they would the barista credit where credit was due. However, when Artemis had the first bite of her carrot cake, Athena couldn't help but giggle as her sister started demolishing the baked good. Geez, Artie. You need to restrain yourself when around baked goods like carrot cake. Apollo says with a winsome smile, getting a glare from his twin. Shut up, Apollo. Artemis retorts with a heated glare. I take it the cake is good? She asked, but didn't get an answer. Her sister was too engrossed with the cake to reply, her mouth was too full to form words. A thumbs up would suffice. When he returned, he was surprised to find both Artemis's mug empty and her plate void of any cake. Wow, I guess you liked it, huh? He said, before motioning to her nose, you have a little something on your nose. It was whipped cream from her drink. Artemis's eyes widened and swiped at her nose with her palm. She stared at her sister with irritation, hissing, I had whipped cream on my nose. Why didn't you tell me? Athena laughed to herself, I thought you'd realize eventually. She teased, before noticing the plate in his hand, for me. He nodded, for you. I hope you enjoy. Let me know if I can get you anything else. He told them and started to leave before he saw Artemis looking his way, can I get you another drink? Same again, please. Drink and cake. She said, making him smile and head back to the counter. She looked at her sister and noticed her looking down at the plate, her fork in hand. Artemis wasn't one to praise a mortal often, especially a male mortal. However, she had to admit the lemon curd Italiano semifreddo he made looked divine. It looked like something you'd find in high-class mortal society. Hell, it was something she imagined Hera serving at her temple. Well, aren't you going to try it? I agree with you, dear niece. Hera says, after seeing the lemon curd. Now I want some of that. Most of the goddesses say at the same time. I'll be sure to include when we take a break. Chef says with a smile. I want a burger then. Thalia says, getting horrified looks from both Hera and Apollo. I want to, but I feel like it would be a shame to ruin it, Athena whispered, admiring the delicate work that must have come with making it. She was no incredible chef like Hestia, Hera, or Grandmother Ray, but Athena occasionally liked to dabble in the kitchen the mortal way. She found there was something therapeutic about cooking, and she understood why so many mortals took it upon themselves to learn. It must have taken him years of practice to achieve such quality of work. Baking, and cooking in general, is as much science as it is art, Hestia says with a smile. Getting grins from the rest of her family as well. Science, feh. Dionysus snorts, even though he has a smile as well. It took a moment, but slowly Athena dug her fork into the lemon curd. The texture was light and fluffy, and she watched it jiggle around as she brought it up to her mouth. Taking a bite, Artemis watched as Athena fell back against her chair, her rhythmic breathing making her sister lean forward in anticipation. Judging by the expression on her sister's face, the dessert had gone over well. Her compassed elder sister rarely let her cool visage slip, always retaining a mask of dignity that kept her true feelings behind closed doors. Not a word. Athena had to hiss out with a flushed face, while her immature brothers are laughing at her expense. Athena wasn't the kind of goddess that wore her feelings on her sleeve, but Artemis was one of the few that could see behind that visage. It was always a pleasant experience for the goddess of the moon to see her compassed sister drop all pretenses and enjoy something for what it was. Then, out of nowhere, Athena let out a loud moan of delight that caught everyone's attention. Okay. That might have taken it a step too far. The whole room fell quiet and every mortal within the establishment, male and female, gaped and blushed in Athena's direction. Artemis couldn't stop the flush of gold from lacing her cheeks. She gawked at her sister, looking between her and the plate. Even she wasn't that bad. It sounded so sexual. Hey Athena. What in the name of Hades was that? Coming to her senses, Athena couldn't stop her eyes from widening. It's not what you think. That was a lie and she knew it. The moment she realized what she had just done, Athena brought her free hand up to mouth in shocked horror. She didn't dare look around the room at the gaping mortals, but the blonde owner was in her viewpoint and she could see his surprise and disbelief. I can't believe I just did that, she thought. Never in her more than 4,000 years of existence had she ever publicly done something so candid. What made it worse was doing it in public. Oh, chaos and order, it's like the flute instance again. Zeus says with a groan, while Athena just flushes in embarrassment. The more immature gods and Aphrodite just burst out laughing, while Annabeth looks just like her mother. What the hell is wrong with me? She hid her face, the embarrassment worse than the time she tried to play the flute of the other gods. When he walked back over, Athena didn't dare look him in the eye. After he provided Artemis with her second round of orders, he stopped and whispered to Athena, I'm glad you enjoyed it. He smiled politely, and before she could reply, he walked away. Oh God, what must he have been thinking? Hey, blonde, he stopped and turned around, and everyone looked towards an older woman who was sat a few tables over. She pointed at Athena, I'll have what she's having. Athena groaned and hid her face in her hands. She wished the earth would swallow her up for eternity. What a day. When the last customer left the fox's den, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as he swapped the open sign to closed. Seeking the comfort of the nearest chair, he finally had a moment to put his feet up and let the day wash over him. Whoever thought running a business would be stressful? Not him, that's for sure. Other people made it look so easy. Not to mention, the movies made it look like a piece of cake. He could, with all confidence, say that it was not easy. Catching Tora the cat on a D-rank mission was easier. Oh, chaos and order, make it end. Athena says while hiding her face out of embarrassment. Never. The more immature gods all shout as one. This is even better than the flute incident. Poseidon booms out in laughter at his rival's embarrassment. However, as stressful as the job was, this was the path he chose to acclimate into modern-day life. As it turned out, he was very good at it. Cooking and baking had always been a hobby of his and something her found therapeutic. Eating fulfilled a survival need for all living creatures, and the feeling of fulfillment came not only from the good of the act of giving, but also the fact that we have helped in some form. Cooking for others helps bond human beings to loved ones and fellow humans. At least, that's how he saw it. I like his mindset. Hestia says with a smile, while Ares makes the universal sign for gag me in response. Ares' actions earn him a smack on the back of the head. Ayla Gibbs, NCIS reference for those you love that show, from Harem. There was also the fact that people loved cake and coffee. Both played huge parts in humanity's daily life that it seemed like a given. Rubbing his forehead with his forearm, he clapped his hands together. Alright guys, you know what to do. The door that led to the kitchen and the backroom swung open, and 3 of his shadow clones marched out in a single file, giving the original Naruto a salute as they started the evening's cleanup. The evening had been a busy one with the post-Christmas rush. A lot of families had stopped by and spent the majority of the evening, as well as couples of all ages, enjoying the post-Christmas bliss and exploring the post-Christmas deals throughout the city. Perhaps he should have opened up in the new year like he originally intended. At least, that way, he could ease into modern life a little easier without having to deal with the Christmas holidays and all it brought with it. Humanity sure had changed. Agreed. All of the immortals say at the same time. All the mortals, including Thalia, just pout at that. Though, he did notice the festive and seasonal beverages went over great with his customers and he was already thinking about what to do once January arrived. Humanity sure a sweet tooth. Well, at least no one has complained as of yet. Everything seems to have gone over well. But that thought, his mind turned to a memory from earlier that day. The image of the 2 beautiful sisters that entered his establishment crossed his mind. Both women were equally as pleased with their orders, though one was certainly more vocal than the other. Naruto had almost dropped the other woman's order when the moan of pure delight reached his ears. He was no blushing virgin, but the fact remained, it caught him by surprise. Athena. You almost made him drop my carrot cake and hot chocolate. Artemis says in outrage to her sister. Athena just continues to try and mimic a turtle hiding in its shell. He was aware food could be an aphrodisiac, but he didn't think it was to that high of a degree. The sisters had stayed for an hour after that, with the one with grey eyes remaining silent for the remainder of their stay, too embarrassed to say another word, while the other demolished another 2 servings of hot chocolate and carrot cake. Where the auburn-haired sister put it all, he didn't know, but it was impressive to watch. Anything he put in front of her vanished within minutes. Not since Elagabalus of Rome had he seen someone devour his culinary wonders with such gusto. Heck, even Elvis in his later years had some form of restraint. I bet Elvis was one of my kids. Apollo says with a grin. The other gods just roll their eyes. The sun god. What a peculiar pair of women they were. He hoped they came back again soon. Watching his clones wipe down the tables and take the empty plates and cups to the back, he stood up and stretched his back, humming in wonder as he felt those necessary pops in his back. Taking the broom out of the closet, he got to work in doing his part before heading home for the night and doing it all over again tomorrow. Well, that's the end of the first part. What do you all think? Chef asks, getting positive responses from his guests. Chef just smiles before forming a portal vortex behind him. That's good. I'll let you all alone while I go record another world I'm watching. Ciao. Chef says before moonwalking into the portal vortex. A swirl of energy appears in the room and from it appears Scheffinator. Welcome back, Chef. We've been waiting. Athena says with a blank look on her face. Scheffinator just shrugs with a carefree smile on his face. Not my fault that my bosses want me to record other worlds involving Naruto. Scheffinator says uncaringly. In any case, let's start part 2. Athena, come on. We need to hurry. Artemis called out, her patience wearing thin as she paced around Athena's library. I'll be a moment more. Just wait one more minute, Artemis. You said that 5 minutes ago. Don't you understand time is of the essence? The response the goddess of the moon received back was a delicate laugh from her sister, accompanied by the sound of one of Athena's many rolling ladders connected to the hundreds, possibly thousands of bookcases that housed Athena's books. If one was to imagine what the personal library belonging to the goddess of wisdom looked like, all one had to do was imagine the New York Public Library and then magnify it many times over. Only then would someone begin to imagine how endless and ever-growing it appeared to those who were not the goddess herself. Even Artemis, after thousands of years of visiting her sister in her temple on Mount Olympus, still required the aid of Glaucus, Athena's companion, to navigate her way through. Hoot. A sound was heard as a snow-white owl came flying from nowhere before landing on Scheffinator's outstretched arm. I wonder what Albus Dumbledore wants now. Scheffinator says with a hum. What? You mean to say that he actually exists? Thalia shouts in shock. Scheffinator just nods. I talk with him occasionally about when he was younger and was a professor at Hogwarts to a wizard named Newt Scamander. Scheffinator says with a grin. If it were any other occasion, then Artemis would be in a more patient mood. However, it had been 3 weeks since their last outing together, and Artemis had been counting down the minutes for their next trip to her new favorite, I Fixed a Spelling Soul, spot in the city. Their plan to spend sisterly time together once a week hit a pair of road bumps called Zeus and Hera, with the two elder gods pulling them away the moment they returned from their last outing weeks ago. Neither Athena nor Artemis had much time to spare after that. If you two want to spend time together, then just say so. Zeus says with a small fond smile towards two of his many daughters. Hera just huffs at being called a road bump. When they weren't fulfilling their duties to their godly domains, they were on Olympus, aiding their aunts and playing peacekeeper between the king and queen. It was frustrating to no end, but neither could find the right opportunity to slip away without being noticed. Now, 3 weeks on, some form of normalcy was beginning to return. Although Zeus was still forbidden from entering Hera's temple, the queen had finally ceased in stirring up a shouting match with her husband. Both the king and queen of Olympus just blush at that while looking anywhere else to avoid the looks the others are giving the two. Scheffinator just quietly chuckles at the duo's antics. In everyone's minds, the month of June couldn't come quick enough. Pacing within Athena's temple, the goddess of the moon knew why Athena was stalling. Her embarrassment from their first visit was still fresh in their minds, and Artemis was well aware her sister did not do well with embarrassing situations, especially when she was at the center of it. For what must have been the first time in her immortal life, Artemis was looking forward to delicious food that was made by a member of the opposite sex. Oh my. Leto says with a smile while Artemis just looks embarrassed. Mother. Artemis shouts with red golden cheeks. Apollo is having a hard time holding in his laughter. Who knew miracles could happen? I swear to Hades, Athena, if you don't hurry up, I'm leaving without you. Don't you understand she could appear at any moment? She's done it before. Fine. Fine. I'm coming. True to her words, the sounds of Athena's rolling ladder grew louder, and the goddess of wisdom appeared on Artemis's right field of vision. She was standing on the mid-step, carrying half a dozen books tucked between her arms. To Artemis's relief, Athena was already dressed for their outing to the mortal world. Her dark hair neatly tied up in a high ponytail. Though it only took a click of their fingers to change their attire, the younger of the two goddesses wasn't willing to waste another second. I wonder who the two of you are talking about. Hestia says with a small smile. The two just look at each other then shrug as they don't know. When nobody, except Scheffinator, is looking, the two send a discreet glare towards the goddess of love. I can finish these later. Let's go before you wear down my floor with your constant pacing. Athena had barely stepped off the ladder and discarded her books when she felt her sister grab a hold of her wrist and proceed to drag her out of her temple. Honestly, Artemis. I'm more than capable of walking by myself. Athena didn't get a response back. She quickened her pace, bringing her level with her younger sister, and noticed her silver eyes darting between bookcases. You don't remember the way out, do you? You keep changing the layout. Just stick to one design and keep to it. A laugh escaped Athena before gently escaping Artemis's grip and taking the lead between the two sisters. Follow me. Having designed the latest layout of her library, she could understand why other members of her family found themselves lost within her temple. An underlying rule on Olympus was that gods and goddesses don't teleport directly into each other's temples. Their temples were like their own personal and private space. A place they could escape from the world and from the crazier members of their family. However, despite the no teleporting rule, it didn't stop the more annoying members from waltzing through the front doors like they owned the place. Artemis was one of the few Athena gave express permission to enter her temple, knowing her sister would not exploit or betray her trust. Unlike a certain pair of pranksters. Athena says while sending a glare towards her younger brothers, both of whom just smile at her innocently complete with halos above their heads. You aren't convincing anyone with that innocent act, Apollo, Hermes. Scheffinator says with a smug grin. You need to make a map of this place. It would make life a lot easier. Artemis muttered though she perked up when she saw the exit. What? And run the risk of Apollo or Hermes getting their hands on it? Not a chance. Their younger brothers, Hermes in particular, could be notorious pranksters if the chance arose. The two male gods were arguably each other's best friend, despite their rough start when the god of messengers stole Apollo's cattle. Since then, the two were as thick as thieves and two of Olympus's biggest playboys. The idea of them getting a hold of her library's layout sent shivers down her spine. Athena shivers in fear of such a thing occurring. Word of advice, boys, never try to prank Naruto, as he was known as the prankster king from hell when he was younger. Scheffinator says with a grin, remembering one of Naruto's more obvious pranks that could be deadly in the hands of a true trap master. Her spear would run with godly itcher if the pair ever tried anything. As soon as they were out, Artemis's pace quickened as they headed for the golden doors to Athena's temple. Come on. She ushered, trying to get her sister to walk faster. I don't know where that damn Aphrodite is, but I don't want her catching us. I don't know how she does it, but she's sneakier than some of the deadliest creatures I hunt. She has this habit of appearing at the most inconvenient moment. This is true. Athena says with a sagely nod, getting a pout from Aphrodite. She just lets out a huff when all the other goddesses nod in agreement. Alright. Athena replied, her heels clicking against her temple floor. I don't think I've seen you this excited in a long time. That mortal has certainly left an impression on you. Don't read too much into it. Artemis insisted, her eyes never leaving the set of golden doors as they got closer. His establishment provides a warm and comforting aura, and it's nice to be in the presence of a male that didn't spend the entire time leering at us. It's a refreshing feeling. A dusting of golden itcher washed over her cheeks. His food and hot chocolate were nice too. My oh my. Do I have to worry about you falling for immortal Artemis? Leto asked with a teasing smile. Mother. Artemis squeaked with a flushed face, while the others are in stitches from laughing so hard. A bark of laughter escaped Athena. I think we both know you liked it more than that. What were the words you used after we left? Athena tapped her chin. Oh, that's right. It feels like someone poured ambrosia and nectar all over our tastibids and covered us in a warm blanket. I don't remember saying anything like that. Funny, because I do. Yes, well, Artemis stuttered as she pressed her hand on the doors and pushed it open. At least I didn't let out a loud and sexual moan after a single bite of lemon curd. This time it was Athena's turn to sputter in surprise. It was not a sexual moan. Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. Besides, how would you know? Don't turn this around on me. The two sisters narrowed their eyes at one another. Though close, the sisters did have the odd tiff, as rare as it was. As Artemis prepared to throw another barb her sister's way and Athena was trying to come up with an excuse for her past action, the rich smell of perfume hit a pair of goddesses like a ton of bricks. Their bodies froze and slowly turned their heads in the direction of the door, where a haze of pink smoke enveloped the doorway to Athena's temple. Neither could say a word as the very person they were trying to avoid being caught by appeared in all her stunning glory. Currently possessing baby blue eyes that shined as bright as sapphires, with bouncy dark chocolate curls that hung down to the middle of her back, the goddess of love was midway through knocking on the door when she noticed Athena and Artemis standing in her way. The two of you really don't fight like siblings do all that often. Demeter says, while her three brothers just look away from each other as they are the ones that fight the most. This got a few snickers from the demigods and Sally. Aphrodite blinked in surprise, but soon became a bundle of joy as she clapped her hands together, seemingly oblivious to the frozen stare she was getting. "Oh, how wonderful. I was about to come and find you both, but you saved me the trouble," she said. Reaching forward, neither Athena nor Artemis could do anything as Aphrodite looped an arm through each of their arms and marched them out onto the streets of Olympus. "Let's have a girls' day. Just the three of us. Won't that be terrific?" "No." Both Athena and Artemis say at the same time. Aphrodite just pouts at the two. Aphrodite just harems when the others started to laugh. The goddess of love wasn't giving either of her fellow goddesses a chance to back out. This was happening whether they wanted it or not. As their senses returned to them, Artemis shot Athena a look of betrayal as she realized the predicament she was now stuck in. "I told you this would happen." All Athena could do was sigh and thank the fates that Aphrodite hadn't appeared seconds earlier. Stretching his arms out in front of him, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den found himself leaning against the counter as he stared out the window and across the street. Trying to repress a yawn from breaking out, he turned and looked across the inside of the den, taking in the people that were visiting. It had been a slow day compared to the last couple of weeks, but with Christmas over and children returning to school and adults returning to work, a routine was beginning to form through his weekdays. Saturday was always going to be busy, while Sunday he was only open for half a day. Even he needed a break and time to rest. Everyone had to nod at that. They all agreed that they did need time to rest, especially Hermes, who happens to be the busiest of all the gods and goddesses. "You all can consider this your time to rest from your duties," Scheffinator says with a grin, getting a thankful look from Hermes. "Boy, the last hour is dragging." Right now, he was in the middle of the slow period. The afternoon rush during lunch had proven to be one of his busiest, I fixed a mistake soul, periods of the day, some opting to stay in, while others chose to take their food away with them and find a quiet spot to eat in solitude, away from the bustling streets. It was a few minutes past 2, and the people slowly filtered out until the room was only a third of the way full. It wasn't that he wasn't enjoying the peace, but there was something about the pressure from the swarm of people all coming in at once that got his blood going. Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie starts playing in the background. Scheffinator just starts chuckling while the others are trying to figure out where the music is coming from. Apollo is the only one to look at Scheffinator and came to the realization. Before Apollo can't say anything, Scheffinator just snaps his fingers, making a zipper replace Apollo's mouth that zips shut. In the backroom, he knew his clones were hard at work. At least, that's what he was hoping anyway. Even after all this time, his clones still had a habit of doing things their way when they got antsy, but those moments had become few and far between. These days, they did as they were told, and he was thankful for it. Noticing a hand waving at him from one of the tables next to the window, he smiled and walked over with his notepad and pen in his apron pocket. "Another black coffee for you, ma'am?" he asked, watching as the young blonde woman stared down at the papers spread out on the table. From what he gathered, the young woman was in the middle of her training to become a teacher. Math, if he remembered right. She'd come in 2 hours ago, during the lunchtime rush, and had yet to leave. Every time he looked her way, he found the woman biting down on her pencil, leaving tiny grooves in the wood. It looked like she was preparing for an exam if the papers were anything to go by, with notes and scribbles covering the blank spaces. "That poor pencil," Athena says with a frown. The rest of her family just roll their eyes. Even Sally and the demigods roll their eyes as well. Percy just shudders at the evil Math, getting a few giggles from his girlfriend. "Yes, please." She picked the mug up and held it in his direction, her eyes never leaving the paper. "How are you getting on?" "I can't say math was ever one of my fortes." "It's going fine. I'd be better with another cup of coffee though." One of his eyebrows went up, but he said nothing. Instead, he took the mug and went through with her next order. Despite professional courtesy, a small part of him was tempted to add a dash of chili sauce to the drink. Rude. As he fulfilled the order, little did he know, at that same moment a street over from the Fox's Den, the three goddesses of Olympus converged on its location. "No. No. Macy's is that way." Aphrodite pointed in the direction opposite to the way they were walking. "I saw the most beautiful pair of Gucci heels that would look great on you, Artemis. Every woman needs a pair of knockout heels." Why couldn't Artemis understand that everything she was trying to do was ultimately for the betterment of the moon goddess? "Let me help you." "Pass." Artemis says with a scowl. "Besides, such a thing is my job." Leto says with a frown directed at the goddess of love, who wilted under the titan's gaze. "Mother." Artemis squeaked again, with a deeper shade to her flushed face. Leto just giggles at her embarrassed daughter, taking joy out of her child's suffering as all parents do with their kids. Biting back a curse, Artemis pulled the struggling love goddess along the pavement. And I told you, I don't need a stupid pair of heels. I'll take a pair of sandals or combat boots at any time of the week. Besides, Athena and I already made plans before you stuck your nose in. But we No. Then, how No. Sighing, Athena turned and looked at the annoyed expressions on both goddesses' faces, though each for different reasons. Aphrodite, you don't have to stay. You can go, and Artemis and I will continue our day without you. Huffing in annoyance, Aphrodite yanked her arms out of Artemis's grip and crossed them against her chest. A pout appeared on her face, but she knew there was nothing she could do to change her fellow Olympians' minds. Fine, but this place had better be as good as you're making it out to be. It will be. It better. Aphrodite watched as Athena and Artemis both suddenly stopped and stared up, coercing her to do the same. When she did, she found herself looking at the most sickly shade of orange she could imagine, with a name written across it. The Fox's Den. She turned her attention back to the two goddesses. This is where you wanted to go. If you want to go to a café, I know a great little place in Paris. It's a terrace café at the western end of the Isle de Lad site. No, this will do fine. Athena retorted, not allowing Aphrodite to usurp their day off. Before Aphrodite could reply, Athena cut her off. Aphrodite, trust me when I say you're going to like it here. Opening the door, Athena eagerly walked inside, the bell ringing off and followed closely by Artemis, whose tongue was poking between her lips when she spied the cakes through the window. Realizing it wasn't going her way no matter what, Aphrodite relented and followed after them. Fine then. She hoped it would be worth it. The second she stepped through the doors, negative thoughts melted away as a wave of warmth covered her body like a warm comforter, and the rich smell of chocolate and coffee enveloped her senses. The delightful aroma forced Aphrodite to stop in her tracks and take a moment to bask in the glow she was feeling. Her eyes hovered across the room, taking everything in from the shade of the walls to the fixtures hanging from the ceiling. You really look cute when you have your tongue out, Artemis. Leto teases, getting a shout from her daughter. Everyone else just laughs at Artemis's embarrassment. Oh, how quaint. She clapped her hands together, eliciting an eye roll from Artemis, though Athena seemed pleased at the reaction. It smells divine in here. I can see why you wanted to come here. Skipping forward, she mimicked Artemis's actions from the first visit and pressed her dainty hands against the glass cabinet. These look delicious. Proving her point, she licked her lips and tapped her fingers on the glass. As Olympus's leading authority on anything relating to chocolate and sweets, she was enjoying what she saw and smelled. Those eclairs looked to die for. Ooey. Aphrodite says with a giggle and fluttering eyelashes. The others just roll their eyes at the antics of the goddess of love. Ares has to suppress a groan while Hephaestus just looked thoughtful. Welcome back. The three heard. Looking over the counter, Aphrodite found herself locking eyes with another pair of bright blue eyes as Naruto reappeared after returning from the backroom. He wiped his brow and smiled at the three women and nodded his head towards Aphrodite. And you brought a friend. It's nice to meet you. Hello, handsome. Athena and Artemis's decision didn't seem like a bad one anymore. She understood why they were so eager. She would be too if he was the one serving them. Blonde hair and blue eyes. Tall and lean. Nice complexion and works in a cute cafe. Mama likes. The goddess of wisdom smiled at the blonde, ignoring the looks Aphrodite was giving the owner, and watched as he gathered three menus from behind the counter. To Aphrodite's surprise, even Artemis wore the tiniest smile on her face. Gone was the usual cold or indifferent mask she'd seen her fellow goddess wear when in the presence of a male mortal. What in the world? It's nice to see you again, Naruto, Athena said, accepting one of the menus as he held them out to the three goddesses. Not wanting Aphrodite to be aware of her nerves on returning to the establishment, Athena buried those feelings away and behaved as she typically would. We hope to come again sooner, but responsibilities tend to get in the way. You know how it goes. I sure do, and don't worry about it. He waved it off. Your table from before is free if you wanted. Or would you like to sit elsewhere? Scanning the room, it was Artemis that spoke. May we take a booth? She pointed to the back of the room, where all the booths were currently available. Sure, make yourselves at home. I'll be over in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Heading towards the table, the trio of goddesses weaved their way through the interior, ignoring the stares they were receiving from the other patrons. Aphrodite couldn't help but give a wink to a cute-looking man sitting on his own close to the restroom and giggled when he nearly choked on his drink. Slipping into one of the available booths, Artemis claimed one side, while Athena and Aphrodite shared the other. Mama likes indeed. Aphrodite says with a tittering giggle. Both Ares and Hephaestus just glare at the image and Aphrodite respectively. Hera just groans while shaking her head. Where did I go wrong with these two? Hera thought to herself. I think I'm beginning to see why you girls like it here. Aphrodite said, making herself comfortable and slipping off her jacket, revealing a snow-white cardigan that showed off her perfect form and curves. The owner is a bit of a hunk, don't you think? Neither Athena nor Artemis replied, and soon, Aphrodite found herself holding back a giggle, amused at how serious they looked as they read the menu. You do look pretty cute when you are serious, Artemis. Leto says, getting yet another embarrassed shout from the moon goddess. The others are just as amused at the pair of sisters. What are you thinking, Artemis? Carrot cake again? Artemis shook her head. I'm not sure. It was heavenly last time, but I feel like I should try one of the others. Red velvet, maybe. There was too many to choose. That's a good one. Though, it would be hard to beat Aunt Hestia's red velvet cake from 7 years ago during the summer solstice. That's what I was thinking, but I'm tempted. I think I'll pick a hot chocolate again, though. Artemis looked up from her menu, her silver eyes staring into Athena's gray ones. Are you going with the lemon curd again? Aphrodite noticed the thick gulp by the goddess of wisdom and watched her bring the menu up close to her face. No, not this time. Besides, that was a special of the day. I doubt he will have it again. I might go for something a little different. Watching the back and forth, Aphrodite's lips formed a tiny O shape, listening to her fellow goddesses converse. She wanted to know what the fuss was all about. They talk as if it's the best thing in the world. Like many of Olympus's goddesses, Aphrodite had wined and dined in the finest establishments humanity had to offer. Whether it was the high society life of the rich and famous in Hollywood, New York, Paris, or London, and being catered to by the best chefs that ever lived, Aphrodite couldn't understand why Athena and Artemis were getting lost in the menu the way they were. Surely it wasn't that good. It was just a cafe diner in the middle of West Village. They weren't even on the Upper East Side. Not to mention no one in the wood could compete with the delicious delicacies that Hestia, Hera and Mother Ray were known to create. This is true. The gods and goddesses, minus Hestia and Hera, all say at the same time. The two goddesses mentioned just flush in embarrassment and beam in pride respectively. It just wasn't possible. Opening up her menu, she scanned through the first page before her eyes widened. Wow. Look at that menu. There was so much to choose. Her favorite cafe in Paris didn't have a menu anything close to this. Oh. Today was going to be a good day. The table fell silent, each goddess finding themselves as wrapped up in what to choose as the other. Beneath the table, all three tapped their shoes against the hardwood floor as the choices ran through their minds. None of the three Olympians looked at each other, their eyes glued to the options. Athena had her eyes narrowed, Artemis was eagerly licking her lips, and Aphrodite was busy biting a nail. My perfect manicure. Aphrodite screams in horror. The others just wince at their ears bleeding while Scheffinator doesn't look affected as he has Bluetooth earbuds in to listen to Weird Al Yankovic at the moment. What to choose? As expected, after a couple of minutes passed, all three felt Naruto appear by their table, his notebook and pen in hand, and giving them all his trademark smile. Thanks for waiting. Are the three of you ready to order? Looking around the table, the blonde owner turned to Athena, deciding to start with her. Straightening her back, Athena cleared her throat. I believe so. She looked at the pair and saw them nod, though Artemis still looked a tad unsure. I'll take a latte please, though instead of vanilla, may I have a dash of cinnamon this time? She watched him nod his head and write the order down. And I remember seeing someone with eggs Benedict the last time I was here. I'll have one of those, please. Yum. Everyone says as they all have had eggs Benedict before. Scheffinator just shrugs as he prefers scrambled eggs any day of the week. Absolutely. Those are all great choices. When he turned to Artemis, the goddess appeared to have finally made her mind up. I'll take a hot chocolate, and this time, I'll get a slice of the chocolate coconut cake. Sure. What kind of hot chocolate would you like? I'm sorry. Artemis looked at the man in surprise and watched him scratch the back of his head. Oh, right. Sorry. I forgot you haven't visited in a few weeks. I've added a couple of different types of hot chocolate besides the standard type you'd expect, and I'm waiting on the new menus to arrive. Would you like to hear them? Artemis said nothing and nodded. New types of hot chocolate. She hadn't prepared for this. Well, right now I have 6 types, but I'm planning on bringing in more over time. Naruto held out his fingers. We've got regular, rocky road, mint chocolate, white chocolate, salted caramel and orange chocolate. Each flavor made her eyes gleam, though one, in particular, stood out. I'll take the salted caramel. You got it. And don't forget the whipped cream and sprinkles. I would never be so cruel. He joked. Across from Artemis, Athena smiled at her sister's eagerness. No matter how cold or intense Artemis could become when crossed, the moon goddess would always be a child at heart. Even Aphrodite, who so desperately wanted to tease the younger goddess, couldn't bring herself to do so. She looked so cute and not at all like the huntress that struck fear into monsters everywhere. You really are so cute like that, my little moon flower. Leto teases, getting another embarrassed squeak from Artemis, while the others all laugh. Aphrodite just squeals at how cute Artemis looked. When he turned to Aphrodite, the love goddess batted her eyelashes at him. "I'll take a strawberry milkshake please." She lifted a delicate finger and pointed to something that caught her eye. "I couldn't help but notice you have a selection of entremets on the menu." "I do, yes." Her smile widened and leaned forward on the table. "It's rare to find that type of dish outside of France done well. Most people tend to overpower one layer too much, causing the rest to suffer. You've sparked my curiosity." Her hand came up and rested in her palm, purposely posing in a way that enticed most men she met. Next to her, Athena and Artemis frowned. "I'm no connoisseur, but I've spent a great deal of time in Paris and around France, learning the language. So, I know how a good entremet should taste." "Ooey," Aphrodite says with a giggle. The others just groan in annoyance at the love goddess's antics. The blonde owner listened and smiled. "If it helps you in making a decision, then you should know I learned how to make entremets during my time in Paris." Aphrodite's eyes shined at that piece of information. "Take your pick and I'll make it my duty to knock your heels off." "Very well, challenge accepted." Winking up at him, she briefly looked across the selection before making up her mind. "That one. The apple spice one, please." "Good choice." After he finished noting the orders down, he bowed his head to the three ladies, though he kept his eyes on the love goddess. "Je reviendrai avec vos commences pour. I will return with your orders shortly." A short gasp escaped from Aphrodite's lips as she watched him walk away. Before long, it was replaced by a smirk and gleam in her eyes that her fellow Olympians had seen one too many times. "You didn't say he spoke French." This mortal got better and better by the second. Athena looked equally as surprised. "I didn't know. Though he does speak Greek and he did say he traveled around the world. Perhaps I should have foreseen the possibility that he could speak numerous languages by that information alone." Athena leaned back against her seat, ignoring Aphrodite's surprise and watching him from the corner of her eye. "He's a very surprising mortal." It had been some time since a mortal had piqued her interest in such a way. That was one more thing she could say that she liked about the blonde. "Being the god of messengers, I can speak from experience in the fact that I can speak multiple languages." Hermes says with a proud smug grin. "Nerd." Ares says between coughs. "He might be the only male mortal I can tolerate." Artemis added, before narrowing her eyes at the love goddess. "Which is why I forbid you from trying to take him to your bed." "What? Hey, you can't do that." Aphrodite whined, leaning forward and stared directly at the younger goddess. "Besides, who's to say I would?" Next to her, Athena scoffed. "Don't think we don't recognize that gleam in your eyes, Aphrodite. We know how you operate," she warned, stealing her gray eyes. "And I concur with Artemis. Don't get any funny ideas. Who I bring to my bed is my business. Not yours." "Well, I like coming here, so I'm making it my business." "Why don't you stick to your Girl Scouts, Artie? Why don't you stop corrupting every tolerable male out there? Maybe you'll notice more of them if you spoke first and shot an arrow later. How about you close your legs for once, instead of acting like a 24/7 7-Eleven? Kick." Artemis's eyes widened before leveling the love goddess with a glare. "Did you just kick me?" In response, Aphrodite did the grown-up thing and stuck her tongue out at the moon goddess. "Alright. That's it." Kicking the love goddess back in return, the two women spent the next couple of minutes kicking and stamping each other's legs, with each swing getting harder and more creative than the last. It would have been a comical sight watching the two beautiful goddesses squabbling if Athena hadn't manipulated the mist around them. To the eyes of the mortals around them, all they were seeing was the three women conversing casually. "Petty much diet?" Ares asked with a grin, while Aphrodite just huffs with a cute pout. Before Artemis can try to attack the love goddess, she found herself restrained by her mother. Leto just looks amused at her daughter's struggles. "I should have known," Athena thought, observing the two squabble like children, both amused and annoyed at the same time. She could feel a headache coming on. The two were the polar opposites of each other and they never failed in bringing out the worst in each other. Subtly, Athena moved any cutlery away from the moon goddess. She didn't need her sister getting any creative ideas. The moment she saw Naruto returning with their orders, Athena intervened and mimicked the actions of their aunt Hestia and how she would stop the two from their petty arguments. She lurched forward and with both hands, grabbed an ear from each goddess and gave them a hard yank. "Ow. Hey." Before either could say another word, the returning blonde reappeared by their table. "Here you go, ladies. Enjoy." Placing their drinks in front of them, he followed up the action with Artemis's and Athena's food and turned to Aphrodite. "Your order will be right out in a moment." "Thanks," she replied, rubbing her ear and shooting a glare at Athena, who was smiling her thanks at Naruto. Once the pain in her ear passed, Aphrodite found herself gripping the straw of her milkshake. As she hoped, it was in a tall glass with whipped cream and rainbow sprinkles coating the top of the drink and a small strawberry delicately placed on the rim. It smelled divine. Looking around the table, she found herself looking in amazement as Athena sunk into her seat, her lat cupped in one hand while the other held her fork. She looked completely and utterly at peace as she took a bite of her eggs Benedict. It was an expression she rarely saw from Athena, barring the occasions the goddesses of Olympus would commune around Hestia's hearth. Across from her, the annoyance slipped away from her occasional rival goddess, whose silver eyes lit up like a child on Christmas morning. Watching Artemis, she had to hold back a laugh as a mustache made of whipped cream coated her top lip while her hand brought up a piece of her coconut cake, which looked incredible. She wanted to tease her but decided to leave it be. Puckering her lips, Aphrodite took a swig of her drink and blinked as the sweet drink enveloped her godly tastipods. It was neither too thick nor too thin and walked that fine line between too sweet and not sweet enough. To put it bluntly, Aphrodite thought it was one of the best milkshakes of her life. Holy Mother of Re, that's good. She whispered, loud enough for Athena and Artemis to hear her, the former of who smirked as she enjoyed the taste of cinnamon in her lat. For the next minute, the three sat in silence, with Aphrodite swaying her legs from side to side beneath the table, her head resting in her palm as she relished in the taste of her milkshake. Oh, she was coming back for sure. She could see herself becoming a regular if everything was as good as this. Ooh la la. Now I really want to try that milkshake. Aphrodite says with a pouty face. Snacks will be provided after a few chapters, and I'll see if you can get some of the items that both were and will be shown in the story. Scheffinator says before taking a swig of his Diet Pepsi, getting an annoyed look from Dionysus. Don't worry Mr. D, I do like Diet Coke too, but all I have at the moment is Diet Pepsi. Scheffinator says with a sheepish grin, getting a nod from the sober god of wine. She was so wrapped up with her delightful drink that she didn't even sense Naruto appear beside her and lay a plate in front of her. She was about to speak but found her words lost on her as she gazed down at the plate. Oh my. Enjoy. Walking away, Athena and Artemis looked up from their dishes, staring at the love goddess as she pushed her milkshake gently to the side, her hands clasping together as she stared down at her order. Neither woman could fault since both looked as mesmerized at the sweet treat on the plate. Sat on the top of the incredible-looking orange-colored pastry was a spiral-shaped apple garnish and cinnamon sticks delicately leaning against the garnish. Like before with the lemon curd, Athena and Artemis thought it looked like something Hera would serve at her temple. The queen of the gods only accepted the best of the best, and the apple spice entremet Aphrodite ordered looked like it belonged nowhere else. I have to reluctantly agree with that. Hera says with a grimace. The grimace was to hide her slight bit of drool at the apple spice entremet. Only Scheffinator caught slight bit of drool from the queen of Olympus. Wow. Artemis muttered. It looked amazing. It looks incredible. Aphrodite whispered, picking up her fork and digging into her sweet treat. Part of her didn't want to ruin the beauty of the dish. No one relished beauty as she did. It was one of her domains after all. Slowly, she took a bite and fell back against her seat at the explosion of flavor. Her lips pursed together, and her fellow goddesses watched as her pupils exploded in a myriad of colors, like a kaleidoscope. I think that's one more person won over. Both Athena and Artemis froze and steadily looked up from their meals. A flush of gold dusted across their cheeks. Across the room, like it did weeks earlier, the whole room went silent and everyone, Naruto included, stared in Aphrodite's direction. The goddess of love cared little for the reactions going on around her, too busy enjoying her godly tastipods getting overwhelmed by the flavor. Artemis almost choked on her drink. Oh no. Not again. At least it wasn't me this time. Athena thought, her fork hanging in the air, watching Aphrodite dig into her meal like a woman possessed. She's worse than Artemis. Bits of mousse covered her lips and crumbs covered the edge of her mouth. Both did nothing but watch as Aphrodite finished off the dessert in a matter of moments. If they weren't blushing from Aphrodite's reaction, they would have been impressed by how quickly she devoured the dessert. Even Naruto, who was busy preparing another order, stumbled at how loud Aphrodite was being. Again? He thought. Handing the customer their drink, Naruto slowly walked over to the table. On the one hand, he was happy to see he'd won their little challenge. He'd yet to have a complaint come through his doors and he didn't plan on starting today. On the other hand, did she have to be so vocal about it? His blue eyes gazed across to Athena, giving her a look amplified her embarrassment. I guess you two must be related too, huh? You're a lot alike. He joked. Athena shrank in her seat, her hands covering her face. Just once, she'd like to come to the fox's den without being filled with embarrassment. Hearing his voice, the goddess of love turned her head, ignoring the fact she had mousse and crumbs all over the lower half of her face, and looked at him with widened eyes. Before Athena or Artemis could say or do anything, everyone watched as Aphrodite stood up on her seat, perfectly balanced in her heels and making herself taller than the blonde. A myriad of colors was rampant in her eyes, switching from blue to green to brown and every other color imaginable, though only her fellow Olympians could see it. Not again. Athena says while covering her face as the others start to laugh at her. She soon sends a look of betrayal at her daughter, who is also laughing. Is everything okay? The blonde owner started to speak but was silenced when she rushed forward, slamming her lips against his. His eyes widened and felt a pair of arms snake around his head, her petite fingers threading themselves through his hair and pulling him in close. He could feel her nibbling against his bottom lip and couldn't help but place his hands on her hips. He didn't know where else to put them. Ho could taste the apple and cinnamon from the dessert, along with the almonds he added to the mix. He wasn't sure how long he stood there, but he could feel the shocked expressions from his other customers staring at them. The clattering of cutlery dropping was a telltale sign. Oh my chaos. I want that dessert right now. Aphrodite squeals out in excitement. The others just hold their bleeding ears, while Scheffinator just whistles away while listening to every Power Rangers theme on guitar. Aphrodite. That's the opposite of what we told you to do. Both Athena and Artemis lurched forward and grabbed the older goddess, pulling her back and forcing her back to her seat. Artemis looked as if she wanted to wring the love goddess's neck. This was what she was afraid of. You can't help yourself, can you? Artemis hissed. Athena glared at the back of Aphrodite's head. If it was possible, the goddess of wisdom would be glaring a hole into the back of her head. Their anger only intensified when Aphrodite started giggling. She batted her eyelashes his way and blew him a kiss. Say thank you like a normal person. Don't worry ladies, I'm sure he didn't mind. She continued to giggle, ignoring the fact that Artemis looked ready to combust. She wished she had her hunting knives with her. Slowly, her giggling ceased and the blonde owner watched as she mouthed. Merci pour le regal. Thank you for the treat. She sent a wink his way too. The surprised Naruto stood there staring at the three women, his free hand coming up and touching his lips. He could feel the sensation of her lips still on his, her tongue begging to wrestle with his. Tasting past the dessert, he detected a hint of honeysuckle and had a feeling there were smears of the woman's pink lipstick on his face. How long has it been since that happened? He honestly couldn't remember. Behind him, the bell to the fox's den rang, and Naruto took that as his cue to turn around and leave, ignoring the woman's resumed giggling. He weaved his way through the tables and chairs, ignoring the stares sent his way, and returned to his spot behind the counter, trying to control the blush on his face. Welcome to the fox's den. Well, so ends part 2. Now, it's time to get back to Naruto in the Star Wars universe, during the time of the Old Republic, which is before Anakin Skywalker became a man-child. Scheffinator says while looking at the readers, with the rest of the group frozen in time. Morning. Good morning. Rounding the corner, he sniffled when the fox's den came into sight with its bright orange frame, standing out amongst the dull colors of the other buildings. Didn't people understand if they wanted to attract the attention of people passing by, then what better way was there than using the brightest shade of the best color in the world? If nothing else, it would cause people to stop and look. You know, he does have a point to that. Hestia says with a grumble. The others gods with businesses and even Sally not in agreement. Digging into his pockets and pulling out a key, he quickly entered the fox's den and locked the door behind him. Switching the lights on, he could still detect the lingering scent of chocolate and coffee from the day before. Shaking the cold away, he eyed up the coffee machine to warm him up as he removed his coat and hung it up in his office, which was nothing more than a little hole in the wall room where he could keep all the legal stuff and keep the computer. Always best to keep all the legal documents someplace safe in case they're needed. Athena says with a nod. The others, Hermes especially, groan at how disorganized they are. Crossing his fingers, he called out his trademark jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu. 24 Narutos appeared in front of him, falling into 3 lines of 8, and offered the original a quick-fingered salute. Alright, you all know the drill. The list of what we need to make this morning will be on the countertop. The special of the day won't be anything too fancy, but I thought we'd go with a blueberry skyr cheesecake. He watched them nod their heads. The skyr yogurt is on the top shelf. If we need any more, hurration over to Reykjavik and head to that store I frequented when last there. The one nearest to the theater house. They nodded again, forcing him to clap his hands together. Alright then. You know what to do. Let's go. What good are shadow clones? Annabeth asks out loud. They are solid copies of the creator original and can transfer their memories back upon dispelling. Chef explains without thought. Lucky. The Watcher's readers all shout in envy. Hi. One by one, the clones made their way into the kitchen, the door flapping in an endless loop as each clone passed through. Letting out another yawn, he turned around and started the process of switching the machines on, from the coffee grinder to the espresso machine to the automatic drip coffee makers. While his clones handled the baking in the kitchen, he'd handle setting the place up in the front before joining them. While he was on his own in the front, he made himself a drink while he could. The blonde ninja was fond of a Spanish lad, though instead of sugar, he added a splash of honey. Honey was packed full of natural sweetness and energy, and in his opinion, a better option than sugar. His hands moved together with perfect fluidity thanks to constant repetition. Honey, along with a shot of espresso added to the mix, made him hum in delight as he brought the drink up to his mouth. Now that was the good stuff. When he was younger, he never imagined anything coming close to his love for ramen. However, these days he couldn't imagine a morning without some form of caffeine to start his day. He had a couple of hours before he opened his doors to the public. Once open, he estimated he'd have around 10 minutes before the first batch of customers started filing their way in, likely for a takeaway order. Wandering the earth for as long as he had, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den had become good at reading people. He knew when to talk to his customers and when to leave them be and let them get on with their day. Disappearing once again into the back room, he returned moments later with a large cardboard box in his arms and placed it down on the counter. Unsealing the top, he got a glimpse of the inside. His new order of paper cups had arrived the day before, and like most things in his life, they were bright orange too. The majority of his customers during the morning rush took their orders away with them, and his paper cups were nothing more than the store-bought cups anyone could purchase. These new ones were ordered and designed for the Fox's Den, with a chibi-styled fox sporting 9 tails in the center drinking a coffee. The QB? I want one. Annabeth and Thalia whine, causing the latter to flush in embarrassment when the others start teasing the duo. The Spanish and the Irish had the best lats. Hermes and Dionysus say at the same time. There could never be too much orange in one person's life. Not to mention, he came to accept it was the little things in life that kept him going. Who knew new paper cups would put a smile on his face? He hoped Karama didn't mind having his silhouette as the new logo for his business. His face if he saw these. He'd be so mad. He whispered, staring at the chibi fox on the cup and letting out a low laugh. He'd never forgive me for turning him into a cute cartoon. Knock. 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 Blinking in surprise at the sound, Naruto turned around and faced the doorway and found himself staring back at a pair of blue eyes on the other side of the glass. Stood with one hand knocking against the glass was a man somewhere in his late 20s if he had to guess and dressed up like a mailman, shorts and all. The man possessed dark curly hair poking out from beneath his hat with elfish features and looked like he was in desperate need of a good night's sleep with dark shadows forming beneath his eyes. It was even more evident when the man broke out into a yawn. Oh, I wish I could get a good night's sleep, but no. Always busy delivering packages and messages. Hermes moans. The others look a little guilty for having their relatives so overworked. The man then offered him a wave. Hey. Any chance I can come in? Moments earlier. We got another delivery coming in. It looks like another set of packages have come in for Janice. He's requesting it for delivery at 8 a.m. sharp. Hermes heard and noticed the heads of George and Martha come to life and turning to look at him. A loud ping followed after, and Hermes couldn't stop the groan from leaving his mouth as he watched Janice's name popped up on the itinerary. As was his every day, the god of messengers, travelers, thieves and a whole array of other domains found himself piled high with his usual responsibilities and duties. None of his Olympian brothers had ever worked the kind of hours he worked regularly. Apollo, in particular, as much as he loved his best friend and older brother, was going through his lazy season. The god of the sun worked little during the winter season, hence why the days were short and the nights long, much to the ire of his twin sister. The sun god spent his time slacking off when he should have been fulfilling his godly duties and wooing beautiful mortals and bringing them to his bed. You are lazy during the winter season, Apollo. Artemis says with an angry frown, getting a nervous smile from her twin. Get Apollo an alarm clock that plays the worst type of music to get him going during the winter. Chef says, getting an evil grin from both Artemis and Leto, while Apollo looks horrified. We just left New Rome an hour ago. What is Janice ordering this time? As much as Hermes wanted to do the same, his godly domains were some of the most time-consuming with the world today and left little room for him to enjoy the pleasures that came with modern society. Back in the day, it was his duty to watch over the travelers and merchants as they went on their long and arduous journeys across Greece and deliver the messages from the sky to the sea and the underworld. As one of the few gods who had permission to cross into the domains of his father and his uncles, it made his position on Olympus all the more important. I miss the old days. At least then I could actually rest more than now. Hermes says with a sigh. The other Olympians start to feel bad about their son, stepson, nephew, brother and his plight. These days, his domains that humanity fell under became so varied thanks to society adapting and growing as whole that he became the busiest Olympian out of his whole family. One positive though was that out of all the gods, Hermes felt he was the one who had the best understanding of mortals thanks to all the time spent mingling with them. The only ones that came close were Athena and Artemis. How do you figure that? Athena was the one to ask. You spend time at historical monuments locations and at various colleges and Artemis has her hunters. Hermes retorts, getting nods from the two goddesses. With today's developments, his immortal family was keeping him busier than ever. Athena and Aphrodite even had the gall to have him deliver their demigods to their mortal parents, moments after their birth. You'd think that was something that needed a face-to-face conversation, but apparently, he was wrong. I thought that the god of the west wind delivered your children to their mortal parents. Annabeth asked her mother. It differs from each version of the multiverse. In some, it's Zephyr the fire steed, in some, it's Zephyrus the god of the west wind, and in others, it's Hermes as the god of messengers. Chef explains for the demigoddess of wisdom. On the rare occasion when he didn't have to work, he often found himself stealing a page out of Apollo's book, spending the night with a woman. There was honestly no better stress relief than a good old-fashioned rumble and tumble in the bedroom, which often led to the birth of his demigod children. Speaking of his demigod children, Hermes felt a flicker of his essence pulsate a few days back somewhere out in California. It was a feeling he'd felt many times before when his demigod children were born. It turned out, a young woman that he spent the night with during the spring of last year had given birth to his latest son. Pigs. Artemis says with a sneer towards her male relatives when they all nod in agreement. You know, even virgins can give beeps and do beep Artemis. Sally says. Mom. Sally. Percy and Poseidon shout at the same time in shock. She speaks the truth. Aphrodite says with a tittering giggle at the horrified look that the three virgin goddesses have. If it wasn't for his hectic schedule and the laws Olympus followed, he would visit his children as often as he could. As it was, the best he could do was watch over them and their mothers from afar and offer them aid when he could. Eyeing up the two snakes that wrapped themselves around his famous caduceus, the two let out a low hiss as they looked over the list of deliveries he kept on the monitor at all times. Looks like he ordered seasons 3 and 4 of CSI. Crime Scene Investigation on DVD. What? He could have just snapped his fingers and made them appear if he wanted them so bad. Throwing his hands in the air, the son of Zeus glared at the monitor. I swear to Hades, that damn border god is doing this on purpose. Just order from Amazon. Not me. We got another order coming in. This time from Dionysus. Hermes rolled his eyes. No, no, no. I know what that drunk is trying to get a hold of. He leaned forward and deleted the incoming order with a click of his fingers. Grabbing his notepad, he wrote down a short message for the god of wine before clicking his fingers and sending it off to the wine god's residence at Camp Half-Blood. Ever since Dionysus made the mistake of chasing after a nymph that Zeus declared off limits, he'd been forced to remain sober and not touch any source of wine for 100 years, as well as run Camp Half-Blood. His punishment made his younger brother miserable. God of wine is right, as all he does is wine. Chef says with a snicker, getting laughs from the other more immature gods, minus the god of wine himself. Zeus just nods in approval at Hermes' decision to deny Dionysus of wine. If he thinks I'm falling for his tricks, then think again. He forgets I'm the god of thieves. His brother would be angry, but he could handle Dionysus. Falling back against his seat, Hermes rubbed his eyes and couldn't stop the yawn from escaping his mouth. Gods, he was tired. The rest of his family didn't know how good they had it. I need coffee, otherwise, I'm not going to make it. Stretching out his hand, a mug reading World's Best Grandma, a recent present from Apollo appeared, coffee filled to the top inside. Giving it a quick sniff, he brought it up to his lips and instantly regretted it. Rolling down the window, Hermes spat the coffee out onto the street, followed soon after by the rest of the mug. As a god, he could make almost anything appear if he willed it so. All he had to do was picture it in his mind and will it to be. However, with food and drinks and other edible delicacies, said god had to have some skill over the art. He wasn't bad by any means and was known to treat his mortal lovers to a home-cooked meal from time to time, which made the food he conjured pretty good. His aunt Hestia and even his stepmother had given him their stamp of approval. Yet, for some reason unbeknownst to him, Hermes could never make a decent cup of coffee. It was the most ridiculous thing. No matter how hard he tried, the Olympian could not crack the code after years of practicing. It was such a mundane thing, yet he failed miserably at it. Right, how can I make home-cooked meals that Aunt Hestia approves of but can't make a good cup of coffee? Hermes rants in frustration, getting mocking laughs from his brothers and sympathetic looks from his aunt and stepmother, more so the former than the latter. If Apollo, Ares, or any of his brothers found out they wouldn't let him live it down. Feeling someone tapping his leg, Hermes glanced over at George and Martha, the latter of whom was trying to get his attention. What? We can afford to take a short break. Why not make a stop and get refreshments? Oh? And where do you suggest? He watched as the two snakes turned to look at each other, whisper something to one another, before turning back to look at him. How about that place up the street? Hermes blinked. Place up the street. He leaned forward and squinted his eyes. It took him a moment to realize what George and Martha were trying to point out. Up the road, not even a minute walk, he spotted a light on in one of the nearby windows. Despite Apollo not yet flying his chariot through the sky, street lights were enough to show off the orange frame that wrapped around the front of the store. "We already are doing that, Herm," Apollo said with a laugh, with Ares, Hephaestus, and Dionysus laughing as well. Hermes just pouts while getting sympathetic pats on the back from Hestia. "The Fox's Den?" he read, before tapping his chin. "Why does that sound familiar?" "It's the café Aphrodite mentioned a fortnight ago at Apollo's poker night," George hissed as realization lit up his face. "Oh, that's right. How could he forget? It was all Aphrodite went on about all night." After a while, Hermes, along with everyone else, had tuned out the love goddess, but some of what she said had filtered in. All he remembered her saying was that some hunky mortal made one of the most delicious strawberry milkshakes and dessert she'd ever tasted, and that it was so good that Olympus's most beautiful goddess rewarded the mortal with a big smooch in the middle of his establishment. It was so good that she dared to say it might be as good as the delicacies Aunt Hestia and Aunt Hera were known to create. "No way in Tartarus they are," Hera snarls, before blushing in embarrassment at her outburst. Hestia just has a small pout on her face. If he remembered right, even Athena and Artemis enjoyed it. If his two elder sisters enjoyed something created by a male mortal, then he must have been good. They were notoriously picky and hard to please. Grinning, Hermes didn't hear what George and Martha said next, before waving his hand and turning his caduceus to its phone form. The Olympian god was already on his feet, closing his truck door shut with newfound energy as he marched over to the Fox's Den. "Well, let's go and see what the fuss is about." Present. Leaving the counter, the blonde owner of the Fox's Den walked closer to the door, gazing curiously at the man on the other side. "Hey, I'm not open yet and I won't be open for a couple of hours." He pointed to the clock on the wall behind the counter. "Come back later and I'll be happy to take your order." What hope he had that the guy would take his word and leave was proven false when the guy didn't move. "Oh, come on. Can't you make an exception this once?" Hermes put his hands together in a prayer motion. "I've been up for hours. I need a little pick-me-up, that's all." Rolling his eyes and feeling a headache coming on, Naruto took another step closer to the door. "It was too early for this. Look, I haven't got much ready. I just walked through the door a minute ago myself. Why don't you go to Starbucks or something? I'm sure one of those is open 24/7. In response, Hermes made a face and stuck out his tongue. "No way. I hate all that franchise crap. They stopped making good coffee years ago, and I hear you make a hell of a drink. I have it from a reliable source that you're one of the best in the city." "Oh? Who's this reliable source?" One of his regular customers maybe. He wondered if one of those food critics stopped by. He thought he saw one stop by a week ago, taking notes on a little notepad and looking very up themselves. Every order sent his way, Naruto put a little bit of extra care into, resulting in the guy leaving with the biggest smile on his face. It was a good feeling watching his customers leave with big smiles on their faces. "I can see Hera being a food critic." Poseidon whispers to Hades, getting a smirk from the Lord of the Underworld. Hera glared at her two brothers almost like she had heard what was said. Hoping to get an answer, the blonde received a wagging finger in return instead. Ah. That would be telling. "I could never give up my reliable sources, but no, they had nothing but glowing reviews about this place you have." Frowning, Naruto was about to speak before he got cut off. "You're here and the machines are on." He pointed to the coffee machine behind the blonde and pointed to the coffee that was in Naruto's hands. "Come on. Help a fella out." Scratching the back of his head, Naruto looked to and from the mailman and his machines before letting out a reluctant sigh. Taking a deep breath, he ignored the dark-haired man making a fist in the air and unlocked the door. "No funny business. Got it." Giving the man a stern look, he watched as the mailman threw his hands up in the air. "Don't worry. I come in peace and all that good stuff. Cross my heart." He made a little motion with his hands over his chest. "I'll be gone before you know it." "Right." Rubbing his eyes and looking at the man suspiciously, Naruto gave a short nod and led Hermes to the counter. His gut was telling him this guy was trouble. Something about the guy screamed prankster. He would know, being one himself. Handing Hermes a menu, the blonde leaned against the counter as he unwrapped his paper cups from their box and picked one out for use. "Take a look and tell me what takes your fancy. I'll let you know if it's currently available or not." "He has you pegged, little bro," Apollo says with a snicker. "He's a prankster himself," Hermes says with a wide grin. "You got it." Naruto made a motion and poked his head through the door leading to the kitchen, giving his clones a subtle sign not to come out. He didn't need a mailman catching his clones at work, nor did he want to explain why there were dozens of himself. "Nice place you have here." "Thanks," the blonde replied. "How long have you been open?" "Not long," the blonde admitted. "About 2 months. I opened up before the Christmas period started. Kept me busy and gave this place the boost it needed, but it got crazy busy and hectic some days." I sometimes wondered if I made a mistake. Hermes nodded. I bet. Christmas is always the worst when you're in our line of work. Delivering goods to the people of the world in whatever form that takes. Glancing across the menu, Hermes whistled, an appraising and dubious look on his face. Wow. Aphrodite wasn't kidding when she said this menu was varied. There's something of everything in here. The Olympian would admit he wasn't one to visit cafes often. They were more his sister's kind of thing or his aunt's. Like his brothers, he preferred bars or nightclubs since he picked up most of his hookups from them, though he enjoyed an occasional beer or two to go with the night. I need something to keep me awake for the rest of the day. A beer. All the male gods shout in unison, getting eye rolls from the goddesses. There's nothing wrong with visiting a cafe every once in a while, Hermes. Athena was the one to state. Not knowing much apart from the standard caffeine-based beverages, Hermes eyed the drink in Naruto's hand. What do you have? Oh, this. Naruto took a small swig of his drink. It's a Spanish latte. Curiosity piquing, Hermes leaned on the tabletop. Is it any different from a regular latte? To answer his question, he received a waved hand in the middle of the air. It's more of an espresso-based drink with textured milk and condensed milk. It's sweeter than a latte, but not as much as a latte with flavored syrup. Though I don't use sugar in my drink and instead use honey. Hermes nodded his head and liked the sound of everything he just heard. I'll take one of those. He especially liked the espresso part. That would do the trick in keeping him awake. Sure. Do you want food to take with you? Hermes scratched the back of his head, looking indecisive. If you can't decide, I've got some lemon squares left over from the day before. They won't be fresh, but they'll still taste good. I can have them bagged up for you. Free of charge since I made them the other day. The god's eyes lit up and a bright expression washed over his face. That would be great. Thanks. No problem. Take a seat and I'll bring them over. Watching as the blonde owner turned around and prepared his drink, Hermes spun around and headed for the closest stable. Maybe this place was alright after all, and everything Aphrodite was sprouting on about wasn't just hot air. The mortal appeared decent enough. After all, who would give away lemon squares for free? No one he'd ever met, that's for sure. Not to mention, if he could win over his male-hating sister, then the guy must be doing something right. Though, watching as the mortal went to work, he understood why Aphrodite kept mentioning the handsome owner. If he'd won over the goddess of love, then Hermes could count down the days she inevitably invited him into her bed. I agree. Hermes said with a smile. Ooey. Aphrodite says with a giggle, getting groans from her husband and boyfriend. Knock it off you slut. Artemis says in annoyance. Her two biggest weaknesses after all were chocolate and handsome mortals. This guy represented both, which meant he was as good as hers, and he didn't even know it. Though, it could be hard with Athena and Artemis around. Both seemed equally as interested in the mortal, though for different reasons. As far as Hermes was concerned, he was staying out of any trouble those three might create. He thought back to the love goddess. Then again, she does like a challenge. He thought, leaning on the table and resting his head against his arms. I wonder if I should start a betting pool. 100 drachmas maybe. He would have to look into this some more when he wasn't feeling as tired. Sighing and rubbing his face as he waited for his order, Hermes shut his eyes and let his body relax. It was only for a minute. His schedule was getting busier by the minute and spent all last night going from state to state. He earned this much. Granted, gods didn't need as much sleep as mortals did and could theoretically remain awake for greater lengths of times. Sometimes days and possibly even weeks depending on the god. However, he was reaching his limit. Is that true? Percy asked his father, getting a nod in response. Wise choice Hermes. Athena said in response to Hermes' choice of staying out the affairs of the AAA goddesses. He just needed a moment to relax. After a few minutes passed, Naruto finished the drink, capping the top with a plastic lid and adding a paper sleeve to the takeaway cup. Alright, that's your drink. Give me a moment and I'll bag up those lemon squares I promised. You alive back there? Z. Stopping mid-step, Naruto glanced up from the drink and his jaw dropped when he looked over at the table the mailman sat behind. You have got to be kidding me. The Olympian had his face slumped against his arms, eyes covered by his forearm and mouth hanging wide open, causing loud snores and gargles to come out. A foot twitched against the leg of the chair and his nose wrinkled. The blonde couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was this guy serious he wasn't running a bed and breakfast? Marching over, Naruto initially gave Hermes a subtle shake to jolt him into consciousness. He whispered for him to wake up, but Hermes merely turned his head. When that failed, he shook him harder, adding some extra force into the shakes. When that also failed, he started throttling the guy, shaking him like a rag doll. Wake up, damn it. Despite Naruto practically throwing the guy around back and forth in his seat, the guy wouldn't wake up as he slumped back down on the table. The guy must have been the heaviest sleeper he'd ever seen. How heavy of a sleeper is he? This is ridiculous. He contemplated driving his fist into the back of his skull, reminiscent of Sakura waking him up during their Team 7 days. Though, he decided against it. It's not like this guy can't take the hit. He thought, standing back up and narrowing his eyes at the sleeping Olympian. I wasn't sure at first, but his energy matches those three women. He hides it well, and you'd think he was just an ordinary mailman, but he isn't. He acted normally around those women for the simple reason that they gave him no reason to be on guard with them. The blonde shinobi didn't say anything, staring at Hermes as the man's face twitched in his sleep. A smirk grew on his face and started cracking his neck and knuckles. If the guy wanted to fall asleep and leave himself open in such a manner, then that was his business. He was the one who knocked on his door before he was open. He'd been lenient and let the guy in, but now the mailman had the guts to fall asleep as he was about to send him off with free lemon squares. This guy didn't know he was in the presence of Konoha's prankster king. Laughter was heard as Hermes squawked at the fact that he got pranked by who most believed was a mere mortal. Deep down in his heart, Naruto was still a prankster and always would be. Seeing a prime opportunity in front of him, he couldn't resist. It got him thinking. When was the last time he pulled a prank on someone? Surely it wasn't as long as he was picturing. Over a decade maybe. Either way, he needed to shake the rust from his mind. He wasn't sure how long he had, but he wasn't going to let this chance slip his grasp. Buddy, you don't understand what kind of a mistake you've made. 20 minutes later, Naruto stifled a laugh as he looked at his handiwork. With more time, he could have created something more elaborate, but sadly he had to make use of his more childish side. Gods, he felt like a teenager from the modern world, laughing at something so mundane and perfectly natural. Teenagers found the silliest of things funny these days, but once again, humor was one of the many things that changed over the years. It was all sex jokes and beep references these days. Oh well. At least, this will teach him. Blame this pig for that. Artemis sneered at her twin, but still smirked at the prank of drawing a beep of Hermes' face. The other, more childish, gods all laugh as well, while Hermes was again squawking. Creating one more clone, he watched as the clone moved behind the sleeping god, crouched down and extended his index and middle fingers until they were inches away from Hermes' derriere. A subtle nod from the original made the clone whisper, lightning style. Two-finger jolt. The result was instant. 1 second, Hermes was peacefully sleeping away with his head in his arms, and the next, he was 5 feet in the air, his eyes wide as his hands fell to his bottom as a sharp pain radiated from his left cheek. The clone quickly disappeared as Hermes landed on his feet. Hey. You're awake. Hermes heard, turning around and facing the counter, where the original Naruto was waiting with a drink in one hand and a paper bag in the other. You were really out of it. I tried to wake you, but you're one of the heaviest sleepers I've ever seen. I wondered if you died for a moment. Why I fell asleep. The god rubbed his eyes, blinking the sleep out of them. When his eyes landed on the clock behind the counter, he went as pale as a ghost. Wait a minute. How long have I been asleep? About 20 minutes. Maybe 25. Oh, no, no, no. Hermes ran a hand through his hair while the other grabbed his phone out of his pocket. He scrolled through his delivery list and felt his earlier stress return with a vengeance. There was half a dozen more orders, and they were all over the world. This was going to take him all morning and into the afternoon. I'm so screwed. As he headed for the door in a half jog, a cough caught his attention. Naruto stood looking at him with a knowing look, shaking the paper and bag at him. Aren't you forgetting something? Oh, right. Running back and taking his order, Hermes placed some mortal money on the table for the drink before bolting and throwing the door open. Thanks again. As sudden as he appeared, the god of messengers disappeared. As soon as the door shut behind him, the blonde ninja's calm facade broke and started to chuckle to himself. I wonder how long it will take for him to notice. He thought. On his own once more, he clapped his hands together. Alright. Let's get this place ready. Olympus. Okay. Something funny is going on here. Hermes thought as he walked the cobbled streets of Mount Olympus. Frowning, he watched as another pair of nymphs often found grazing around the foothills of Olympus sauntered off, erupting into a fit of giggles and hushed tones when they saw him. One by one, as the incidents grew, his paranoia started doing the same. Everyone he came across resulted in the same issue arising. It had been like that all day, and Hermes was beginning to think he was amiss on some kind of joke floating around his immortal family. Every delivery stop since this morning, no matter who it was, would either start with them laughing at him or forcing themselves to look away as he handed them their delivery. Even George and Martha, whenever he was inside his chariot truck, would look away from him. Ha! Even the snakes are silently laughing at you, Herm. Apollo says with a guffaw, even Hades has a small smirk on his face. He could have sworn he heard them laughing underneath their hisses. Truth be told, he cared little about his companions after his Spanish lad. He could still taste the delicious remnants of his drink on his lips. The Olympian almost crashed his chariot truck when he brought it up to his mouth for the first time. Not to mention, the lemon squares were heavenly that his eyes nearly rolled into the back of his head. Oh, he understood the appeal after his cup was empty and his bag of lemon squares became substantially lighter. It was damn good. Hermes just groans with his head in his hands as his family still made fun of him. Even the demigods and mortal joined in on the merriment. No. It was better than good. It was amazing. It was no wonder his sisters and the love goddess were taken with the little café the way they were. He would be going back in the future, and this time at a reasonable time. It could be a good place to pick up beautiful women too. Desiring nothing more than the rest he deservedly earned, he headed in the direction of his temple, located on the eastern side of Olympus. As he closed in on his home, Hermes spied a cloaked figure coming from the opposite direction. His smile grew as the scent of toasted marshmallows and wood smoke danced around his nose and grew stronger the closer the figure got. There was only one person on Olympus who carried that delicious scent. And Hestia. Hestia, the eldest of the gods and the firstborn child of Kronos and Re, was every bit as beautiful as her two younger sisters, carrying the sweet demeanor that earned her the love and respect from every resident on Olympus. Truthfully, she was desired by many on Olympus, and history had shown the suitors that offered them to her beauty. However, all were turned away, as Hestia remained true to her vow. Woe to any man who dared force themselves upon the goddess of the hearth and would find themselves sent into the eternal darkness with King Tartarus. This is true. The big three all mutter as one with dark looks that scream overprotectiveness, getting shivers from all the other males, except Chef. Hello, her daughter voice broke halfway through his name, her eyes marginally widening. Oh dear. Huh? Hermes, dear. His aunt's face softened, though a hint of annoyance laced her voice. Have you been spending time with Ares again? Or did you run into Enyo? He shook his head. Not recently. I just got home from deliveries. He hadn't seen Ares all week. The god of war had disappeared off into the mortal world with Aphrodite again, likely on one of their so-called getaways, and the pair likely wouldn't be back for another week or so. Enyo, on the other hand, hadn't been seen in years. His wayward older sister didn't visit much, primarily due to the estrangement between her and her parents. I see. Hermes watched as a mirror was conjured in his aunt's hand. Have you looked in the mirror recently? Shaking his head, his aunt held the mirror up to his face, and Hermes couldn't stop his jaw from dropping. What the hell? A choked gasp erupted from his body and caught himself leaning closer to the mirror, his hand reaching up and touching his forehead. Aunt Hestia. Yes, Hermes. Why is there a beep drawn on my face? His aunt's smile never faltered. I don't know, Hermes. I was hoping you would fill me in. I'm equally as confused as you are. Hermes got a sense his good-natured aunt was trying her best not to laugh at his current predicament. The way the edges of her mouth twitched and the way her idle hand tugged at the hems of her sleeves were a telltale sign. It wasn't hard for the Olympian to determine who defaced his face. There was only one moment in the day where he could say he was unaware of his surroundings. Not you too, Aunt Hestia. Hermes said with teary eyes towards his kind aunt, who couldn't contain her giggles. How had he not noticed? It was over 12 hours later. He'd been walking around with a beep drawn on his face the whole day. It was no wonder people couldn't keep a straight face when they saw him. Even Hestia looked ready to bust a gut in hysterics. That asshole barista did this to me. The image of Naruto appeared in his mind, and Hermes couldn't stop his eyes from blazing with godly energy. No wonder he seemed in such a good mood when he woke up. His aunt's eyebrows raised. Barista. He threw his hands in the air. The one Aphrodite keeps talking about. He stomped away, snapping his fingers and making the ink-drawn beep disappear from his forehead. If he thinks he got one over on me, then he's got another thing coming. Doesn't he know who I am? Rubbing his hands like a Disney villain, a devious glint appeared in his eyes. Oh. The payback that's coming his way will be legendary. I practically invented mischief and pranks. The smile never faltered from Hestia. I'm sure, dear. Though I'm sure he meant no harm, so please go easy on the mortal. Nothing life-threatening, please. She asked, with an edge of authority laced in her words. Granted, the mortal had been rather ballsy to do such a thing to her immortal nephew, but he didn't deserve to die over it. Thankfully, Hermes was one of the more laid-back gods on Olympus. If such a thing happened to Ares, or gods forbid Zeus, then she doubted the mortal would last another second. He'd be reduced to ash before he could blink. I can take a joke. Zeus grumbles with crossed arms. His siblings all look at him with looks of disbelief. Even his own children have the same looks of disbelief. I won't do anything rash, Aunt Hestia. I'm just going to one-up him. That's all. I'm not that petty. Thank you, Hermes. Watching him walk away, Hestia spied the clothes on his back before letting out a giggle as she covered her mouth. It appeared the face sketch had not been the only gift Hermes received. On the back of Hermes' mailman uniform, the barista also added some extra patchwork to his mailman uniform. In this case, in bright orange letters, the word juicy, in all capitals, was sewn across his back, with an arrow pointing down to her nephew's posterior. Wabu how Hermes squawked in pure shock, while everyone else is ROTFL, rolling on the floor laughing, at the audacity of the barista. I wonder how long it will be before he notices. Hestia muttered to herself, watching her nephew march away before continuing down the path, the odd giggle escaping her lips throughout the rest of her day. That's the end of the chapter. Well, time to get ready for March Madness and my birthday just 2 days before St. Patrick's Day. Peace to all my readers out there. Chef says while looking at the fourth wall. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.